Hello, and thanks very much for joining the Halal Travel Global Summit hosted by Remaking. My name is Soumaya Hamdi, and I will be your host for this discussion about remaking the customer experience in tourism. I am the founder and managing director of Halal Travel Guide in the UK, where we organise trips designed with Muslim travellers in mind, and where we also design itineraries for Muslim travellers to lead independent trips. And today I have the pleasure of hosting Mr. Mayank Dutt, the Vice President and Head of Marketing and Communications in Southeast Asia for Mastercard. Mayank Dutt leads marketing and communications for Mastercard in Southeast Asia, accelerating the organization's core business, diversifying customer base, and building new businesses across the region. And prior to Mastercard, Mayank served as director for regional insurance partnerships for Asia Pacific and Europe, the Middle East, and Africa at Citibank, where he spent 16 years across various geographies and functions. I'm also joined by Dr. Nurhafihz, who serves as an editorial board member for the Journal of Islamic Marketing. And his research includes looking at how technologies such as artificial intelligence affect consumers and services. You can find his latest work, which consists of the book chapter Halal Service Marketing, a Strategic Framework, published by Springer Nature. And finally, I'm joined by Chong, who is the founder and CEO of GlobalTix, a digital ticketing and distribution platform that provides end-to-end solutions in the tourism space. He has amassed his years of experience with Silk Air, Singapore Airlines, and Sentosa Development Corporation, which have offered him invaluable exposure across the industry. So, as you can see, I am joined by a really great selection of panel members, and join me in welcoming them to this session. Welcome to each of you, and thank you so much for taking the time out today to join us for this discussion.
Thank you for inviting. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, so I think we've got a really interesting topic of discussion today: remaking customer experiences in tourism. Now, as we all know, we're sort of starting to come out of the pandemic. Of course, it varies from region to region. We're starting to see opening up more in Asia, whereas, for example, in the Western world, we've been opening up for about 6 or 7 months now. And there are various changes, I think, that all of us have observed. So let's dive right in. I'm going to go straight to my first question, which is regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. It's changed a lot of things, both in the practical terms of how we travel, but also our approach, the psychology to our traveling in general. So I'd like to ask Mr. Mayank and Mr. Chang what the biggest change you have noticed amongst traveler preferences compared with before the pandemic, with specific experience to your customers at Mastercard and GlobalTix. If I can head first to Mr. Mayank, please.
Thanks, Soumaya. And a really good question to get started with, to be honest. First of all, a good day to everybody who's tuned in. And a special thanks to and my gratitude to Crescent Rating and Halal Trip for organizing today's session. Diving right into it, some things are more obvious than the others. So, for example, from the data that we see from the beginning of this year, there's a massive pent-up demand for travel that has been accumulating over the last 24 months of the pandemic, which is pretty obvious, right? So we see that big rebound is already happening, right? We don't need to look too far. We'll go to the airport and see long queues, people lined up, airfares skyrocketing. So we know that it's back, and it's back with the bang, so to speak. But a couple of the things are a little bit more peculiar, which has been influenced a lot by what's happened in the pandemic. So to start with, we've seen a lot more, and we do a lot of research, and we just conducted the Mastercard Economic Institute conducted a research very recently on travel, and we found something very, very interesting, which is people now are gravitating a lot more towards experiences over material things, and that impacts everybody, right? So when we are planning travel as consumers, when as marketeers we are talking to them, or organizations that are organizing the travel itself, like OTAs and beyond. And how does it change? It changes a lot of things. So firstly, it's not just about the destination. It's about the kind of unique experiences people will get to enjoy once they're there. That's one. The other piece is, people are researching a lot more about what they can experience at a destination. So earlier on, before the pandemic, it was the best deal. it was price dependent. Now it's a lot more dependent on what I can get to do when I'm there. And it's not just about food, it's not just about shopping. It's about a lot more non-material things. So that's one thing that we see, a major swing towards. Over 60% of people or respondents that we interviewed said that they would put experiences over material things. So that's one big change that's coming. It's already there actually. The other piece, which again, you and I, we've all gone through it, and we will go through it over the next few quarters, is the choice of destinations is now greatly influenced by restrictions or the lack of them. Right. So earlier on, it used to be budget dependent, or hey, you know what, I want to go on a beach holiday, let's head out to the beach. But now it's not about that. Now it's about, do I go to market X versus Y? Hey, you know what? There's PCR on arrival, there's day 5 testing, there is this and that, versus Y market, where all I need to do is land up, show my vaccine certificate, and I'm good to go. And that, while we may think that it's going to be there only in the interim, we see it being there for a little longer than that. And even when it is taken away, I'm very much sure that consumers will have this latent thought in their heads saying that, am I really safe if I go there? Is that the destination of choice? And that's where, as marketers, we need to be ahead of the game as well, to make sure that, hey, that's what the consumer's thinking. It may not be an obvious thought in their minds. Can we build an ecosystem that makes them feel comfortable before they leave, while they travel, and once they're at the destination? So to me, these would be the 3 trends that are going to be prevalent for time to come, Soumaya.
For my side, my data is exactly what Mayank has said as well. I think he really spot on all the 3 key trends. I would just add on a couple more things on top of what he mentioned, right? Research. People are definitely doing a lot of research prior to going to a destination. And because of this research, what we have also noticed from our system is that people are booking earlier. It used to be people who goes to Universal Studio in Singapore, they book one day beforehand, or on the morning itself, they will book before they arrive. But we see this trend that people are booking at least 2 weeks to 1 month in advance. So people are doing not just research, but they are already making their bookings, they're planning ahead of their travel. That's something that's pretty different from what we used to see. Again, it boils down to research. The second thing that I think Maya has also touched on, I just want to emphasize on that. It's about experiences, and it's not just about the major experiences across the entire network that we see. Yes, people are going for the big experiences. I mean, people are still turning up at Burj Khalifa, for example, right? But people are consciously looking for more unique experiences to do. So in their travel, what they will do is that they will cover 1, 2 big have to do checklists, but they are consciously looking for smaller activities that they will actually go. And this trend, it's really big. Just give you an example. My brother went to Chiang Mai. So he went to the temple as usual in Chiang Mai, of course. And subsequently, he brought his kid on a bicycle trail along the mountain. And when he came back, his kid response was that was the best thing they did in Chiang Mai. So people are actually looking out for unique experiences to do. Okay? And the third point is definitely true. If you still have PCR tests, if you still have quarantine, you are out, completely out. We see negligible recoveries from countries or destinations that still require tests, basically. Yeah, that is a key big factor.
Thank you both. I mean, you've touched on some really interesting things in terms of the psychology about how people are choosing to experience things. And I think it's fair to say, regardless of where you were during the pandemic, many of us have come out of it seeking out these closer experiences that bring us closer to the locals. And in fact, we've seen it as well on our trips that people are looking for experiences that connect them with the local community and bring them up close and personal. And sometimes it's something very simple, like a cookery experience, or as you said, Chee, the cycling experience, So this actually neatly brings me on to my next question, and is something that I think is a key question for destination management organizations, for tourism boards, and really for anyone working in tourism, which is about how increased digitization and technology can support a better future for tourism. And when I say better, I mean in terms of the customer experience. I mean in terms of how easy it is to reach your destination, to experience your destination, but also in terms of the sustainability, in terms of the benefit that is bringing the local destination, the local people. How is it that we can incorporate more digitization to make it easier for these immersive travel experiences to become more of a reality? And I'll open this question up to the floor, so please feel free to go ahead.
If you may allow me to go first.
Sure.
I think absolutely, right? So, one thing we've seen, and again, I'll keep quoting the research that we do, but it's something very obvious to us as consumers as well. Consumers are demanding a lot more flexibility in payments. They're demanding a lot more digitization in payments, and even contactless, for example, in pretty much all the markets that I manage. We've seen a major shift towards contactless payments. Why? Because people don't want to touch the money. They don't want to touch the terminals. It's not being safe. It's not hygienic. And also the fact that you're more secure when you're using digital modes of payment. So we see that the digital first behavior is already here and is going to proliferate even more because the lines between offline and online are getting merged quite a bit. So that's one. The other piece is, people also, as you're aware, when the pandemic happened, businesses suffered, and especially in the small to medium enterprises in the travel space. But one thing we've seen that a lot of the ones who've the players who've survived are the ones who've used this time, the last 24 months, to gather around and put a lot of effort in making sure that they are able to innovate, convert physical modes of payment into digital, physical premises into online, and that has seen them sustain and be resolute. And that's where we'll see digitization having a major impact. So that's on payment behaviors, which obviously is an area that we operate in. But as even from a consumer behavior standpoint, what digitization has done has made travel a lot more immersive even before people travel. So I've come across brands that have really started using technology like AR to get people embedded into the destination even before they board the flight to get there, even before booking, bringing the destination to you. You even see platforms like Airbnb innovate a lot more on that, making it a lot more immersive before you land up there. So I think digitization definitely has had, in my view, a positive impact. It has also, made some of the very brick and mortar driven brands who are still in a very analog world either pivot to digitization or fall on the wayside. So that definitely has had a positive impact from what I see in payments as well.
Thank you.
May I jump in here? Yeah. So I certainly agree with what Mayank said. I think tourism essentially it's a service, and technology has always played a key role in enabling the tourism space and travel to be much better experience for the travelers. Right? So I think for increasing emerging technologies, insight key here in terms of how they will enable a better future. So for example, virtual reality in terms of delivering on existing customer expectations, right? With customers, with travelers needing to prepare. We talked about travelers doing more research on their own. So certainly with virtual reality, they are able to educate themselves of what to expect at the destination itself, even before they are there. So that certainly helps the whole experience, right? So with travelers becoming more educated, they can then, behave as how they should be at a destination. It just facilitates the whole experience. And not just that as well, it's also in terms of creating new experiences with AR, for example, augmented reality. One new experience could be, and if we kind of focus it on the whole halal travel side of the story, it's on displaying information about what's halal, what's not, in a less intrusive manner, whereby you can augment the physical space with AR. So it then makes it a more inclusive environment for both Muslim travelers as well as non-Muslim travelers, in case the destination aims to target both. And I think lastly as well, in addition to existing experiences and new experiences, I think we're also seeing technology playing a huge role in terms of accountability, whereby you have technologies such as blockchain, for example. These certainly help in terms of providing that information, that history of the destination and the products and services that are there itself, right? And accountability as well here, we can certainly talk about in terms of social media, in terms of the audiences themselves, the travelers themselves sharing these experiences. And it's just this rapid iteration of producing those experiences as they happen in that destination. So I think a lot of the aspirations of travel, right, whereby we talk about experiences and expectations and creating that experience together with travelers. Certainly, technology is helping us to reach that the ultimate goal that I think even travelers and also travel providers are looking forward to. Yeah.
I think there's no doubt that technology is a huge impact in all businesses and in terms of customer service as well. I think there's no doubt on that today, right? I think the key question for me or for destination marketing people is that how do you make the smaller, the medium size, the mom and pop who creates unique, very fun experience? How do you digitalize them and make them discoverable, right? So that they can distribute their products globally to OTAs, to other countries and things like that. Or if you have a halal food, how do you let the whole world know that you have halal food in your premises and things like that? I think the key is that the destination marketing or the tourism board people have to consciously push or give grant to the smaller players. Just give them a push, because technology is no longer as difficult or as expensive as it used to be. Some people talk about, wow, I have to invest 500,000 US, $1 million US. I say, no, technology is no longer that expensive, right? There are so many SaaS model ticketing solution out there. Can take this one for 30 USD a month, you get some form of technology. If you sign up a WhatsApp business, it's free, right? And straight away you can start to communicate with your customers on your website, right? So I think these players need a little bit of help. And what you need to do is to really provide lessons, give them a little bit of push, guide them along the way. And suddenly you realize that your destination as a whole is a lot more interesting, it's a lot more discoverable, and consumers are able to find information so much more easier. I think that that's going to be key for all the destination people when they look at the country as a whole. The second thing, I think in terms of customer experience, it's easy. We all know that we can use WhatsApp, we can use Telegram, we can get our things changed, we book our things so much more easier. But what I think is slightly harder is how can technology help in terms of sustainability. I think that is a bigger challenge as an industry. But we do start to have players that try to play their part. If you look at Skyscanner, if you search on Skyscanner today, you can see what is the carbon efficiency, right? And hopefully with that, makes the consumer with better informed to say, look, choose a better flight. Not just on price, right? I mean, yeah, it's a lower price, but you have 2 stopover before you reach your end destination. Think twice before getting this flight. Why don't you get a slightly more expensive direct flight and do better for mankind as a whole, right? Hopefully from flights, it moves on to hotels and it moves into something like over tourism. I mean, there are certain places simply over tourism. And how can you say that, look, instead of spending 3 days in Venice, why don't you just spend one night in Venice or one day in Venice and then go out of Venice and look at other places around, right? So with technology, we hope to make tourism a lot more sustainable as well. And that's what I hope that in the next 2 years we can achieve as an industry to move towards sustainability. Yeah.
I think we've teased out a lot of really important points here. And I think one of the key issues with adopting digitization, as you said, is knowledge. And I think actually it's not just an MSME problem, is it? Because we've got some tourism boards and some destination marketing organizations that are still relatively slow in finding how to connect with their target market. Because of course you've got most people now. Before it was, you could say, millennials and Gen Z, right? They get a lot of their information from social media, but actually I think it's a lot of us now, a lot of tourism segments that are using social media for inspiration and also for information on how to plan their next trip, where they should go. And specifically on the sustainability narrative, it's feeding that narrative in so that it becomes something that is expected of every trip. And it's, I think, quite a big task, isn't it? Because tourism over the last 20, 30 years has been about get a good deal, get yourself that package deal, stay at, a certain type of accommodation that maybe is a luxury accommodation but doesn't really help the local community that much. Maybe the money doesn't circulate locally that much. But now consumers are becoming much more aware. They're much more conscious about their consumer choices in general, right? We know this. We've seen the changes, and people are more willing to pay a little bit more if they know that their purchase has a positive impact, because it feeds into your identity as a consumer. What kind of consumer am I? Am I a consumer that gives back, or am I a consumer that only takes? And I think we've also seen, you mentioned Skyscanner, Chong, and Booking.com also in the last 6 months or so, they've added those sustainability options. I think, of course, we have to be critical, though, don't we? Because what is sustainability defined as? Is it defined as the hotel doesn't wash your towels every day, in which case they get a sustainability leaf on the top? So I think there's definitely a long way to go, but digitization is a must, as you said. And I think, there are resources out there that can help MSMEs, that can help tourism boards to adopt this relatively quickly, as you said. And I think that leads onto our next question, really, which is about the kind of narrative that we share about traveling, about tourism. And I'm going to direct this firstly to Nurhafihz, as the marketing expert. What do you see as some of the key messages that those seeking to specifically attract Muslim travelers to their destinations should be communicating to this particular target market, given all the factors that we've just discussed, given this type of new normal that we find ourselves in?
Thanks, Soumaya. I mean, this is a challenging question as well, right? Because communications, as we know, is dynamic, and today is the new normal. Then next month something else might be the new normal. But if we take now as a snapshot, as far as we know now, what is the new normal currently? I think in terms of destinations themselves, they should focus on three aspects for their messaging. The first is to focus on reliability. The fact that the destination is open for business, the attractions are open, the attractions not just for the adults are open, but also for the children are open. And it's also to communicate reliability in terms of the expectations, right? That there aren't going to be those tests that the others are doing, that we're going to facilitate the whole experience for you. So I think reliability will be key, because these travelers, right, some of them, they remember what those experiences were, and they have set some of those expectations based on those experiences. So to be able to perform accordingly, that would be key. So the first would be that, hey, we are that destination that you remembered, these are the expectations, and more importantly, we are open for business. I can cite my own example, right? So me and my family, we wanted to book a staycation, right, here in Singapore. But we've been struggling because a lot of these attractions are closed for my 4-year-old. So we are still struggling, and to find a place that we can bring her along and she can still enjoy the rides and whatnot. So yeah, that's on the point of being open for business. The second, I think, the second messaging that destinations should focus on is on assurance. This aspect of assurance comes in many forms. It's about also practicing some of the good lessons that we learned during the pandemic, about contactless, for example, contactless touch points, using being cashless and so forth. So that's an aspect of assurance that I think destinations should continue. But also peculiar to Muslim travelers. And if we look at Muslim travelers as a whole, generally we tend to travel in large families, some of us. So that sense of assurance also comes from the fact that, hey, we are safe for everyone, we are safe for your family. So, I mean, we are safe for you, so you don't have to be worried, because when you come back to your family, and it's a big family, we've taken care of you. So that sense of assurance is also important. That communicating aspect of, hey, we are safe, not just in the COVID sense, but also in terms of the touch points that we have. And I think last, in terms of the messaging that perhaps destinations should focus on, peculiar to Muslim travelers, would be this message of inclusiveness. So we've heard this before, right? Muslims, you have to be uh, friendly towards Muslims, Muslim friendly travel, right? So being inclusive towards their needs. So, for instance, prayer places, halal food, and so on. I mean, that will still continue. That will still be key for destinations to attract Muslim travelers. But I think another dimension towards inclusiveness would be in terms of the nature of the target audience itself. So instead of just targeting international travelers, it's also attracting domestic travel. So even here in Singapore, I think when we look at the campaign that was recently launched, which was Singapore's Reimagine campaign, right? I think that was a very clever messaging there, because it's almost questionable who's the target audience. Is it targeting international travelers to Singapore, or is it targeting, is it trying to spur domestic travel? So I think this inclusiveness in that sense, whereby destinations are able to craft very clever messaging to target both their locals as well as international travelers, that would be key, because the Muslim travelers could also be coming from within the destination itself.
So just to add to Dr. Hafiz's point, and he's very accurate. So we do have a strategic partnership with the Singapore Tourism Board. So Dr. Hafiz, the campaign you're talking to about is the one that we had conducted with them. And there was a very key focus that while we want people to come in, we cannot neglect the ones who already live here. So, and that's why the whole idea of reimagining Singapore was born. It's for Singaporeans, residents of Singapore, and people who want to come back to Singapore. So I think it, in a nutshell, puts it very nicely, because we're supporting local merchants. We're making Singapore be seen in a different light, because there's so many places, and I've been living here so many years, but in the last 2 years, because we had to huddle in smaller groups or in isolation, I've discovered a lot of trails and new places which I didn't even know existed. And so there is always this desire of, like you said, being inclusive. And again, as marketeers and as even merchants and corridor owners, it's very important that you cater to both sides. It's not just that, hey, there's big money to be made or leverage inbound or outbound. It's the people who are here as well. Very, very important.
And just to kind of hone in maybe a little bit more on specifically Muslim travelers, because, as we already know, that it's quite a vast segment when we're talking about Muslim travelers. We like to think that this is one uniform segment who all have the same needs and the same desires, and you can just send out one message to all of them and it's going to resonate. But in your views, and I'll open this up to everyone, how do you think destination marketing organizations, and in fact anyone really involved in travel and interested in tapping into the Muslim travel market, how can they start to tweak out and tease out these nuances and choose where to hone in on? For example, we know that Muslims based in the Gulf typically, and again stereotyping, but based on statistics, typically they travel in families. Typically they like to stay in plush hotels, 4 or 5 star. They want to go shopping, and they want to go to places where you can get good shopping deals. Whereas if you look at for example Singapore, Malaysia, you've got the family dimension, but you also have the younger segment who are looking at more independent travel, maybe looking at traveling with friends in groups. And then you've also got the less well researched segment, which is specifically my area of interest actually, which is Muslims in Europe, UK, US. You've got 40 million Muslims between UK, France, and Germany alone. And it's kind of like the forgotten segment, really, of the halal economy, and a very underserved segment, but also a segment that has quite a lot of purchasing power and desire and capacity as well to get out there and travel, especially in Europe, where you get quite a lot of annual leave days, 5 or 6 weeks holiday a year. What are you going to do with those days? You want to go out, you want to travel. So how can we curate messages that tease out these kind of nuances? And I'm conscious that maybe that's quite a complex question, but if you maybe just choose to focus on one or two segments, just some practical examples, or maybe messages that you have seen that you felt were really effective.
Can I jump in first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely.
So okay, I think from observation on ground, I mean, in Indonesia or even in Malaysia itself, right? I just want to echo that the FIT travelers, the Muslim FIT travelers, is it's already here and it's huge, right? We used to think of Muslim travelers as big groups, organized. They will come in, then you have your halal travel agent food where all will sit down and we eat together. Then subsequently they will say, okay, it travels in big family groups. They will come in like at least minimum size of 15 to 20s coming in. So you got pre-book everything and everything is planned for package tours. But I would say that in the last 2 years, our observation in many of our partners, in many of the attractions, is that many of the Muslim travelers now are in small family groups, really small family groups, like in 4 or 5, only have 2, 3 kids, 3, 4 kids, and the number is not small. It's huge. I mean, if you look at the Muslim market itself, it's really huge. So even the FIT travelers are huge itself, right? So the question now is that how do we target this group of people? I mean, we used to know how to target by saying that, look, we get all the DMCs to prepare the right packages, and then we hit the market and says we have groups, we have restaurants, we have these, and then we will move you around to make sure you have a good experience. But now with FIT travelers, it's getting harder, right? Because they get their information from everywhere. So I think what, in terms of marketing, what you really need is to literally seek out the right KOLs or the right influencers in this market itself. I think it's starting to have more and more Muslim influencers who travel and blog about how they travel, which restaurant they went to. And I think in terms of marketing, you need to target this group of influencers, this group of young kids, predominantly they're quite young, this group of young kids going around exploring places, and to really to get the information, to get the excitement out, and to get people to feel that yes, it's safe to travel. It could be fun to travel in small groups across a destination. You will be able to find your halal food, no problem. You will be able to find your mosque and things like that. So in terms of marketing now, it's getting harder. It's getting more fragmented. But I think the FIT part cannot be ignored now. You definitely need to find the young Muslim influencers that really impact the market significantly. Yeah. So in my view, that segment is still a blue ocean. Hardly anybody touch on it right now. And in terms of halal website, there's an explosion. Literally, there's an explosion of halal travel website now across in Southeast Asia itself. Suddenly, everybody blogs about it, talk about it, and it goes viral and things like that. So it's a huge segment, and it's a huge new segment that we are looking at.
No, I think just to add on to what Chong said, segmentation is the key. It's not one size fits all. It just doesn't work that way. So you can't say halal and then it fits everybody. It's very broad. So one of the things, so as CC was talking about, the young millennial Gen Z kind of segment, which is redefining the way travel has to be looked at. Another interesting segment, which is kind of underserved in a way, is actually the super affluent. And that's again the other end of the pyramid. But we found, especially with, talking to my colleagues in Saudi Arabia and looking at the corridors between Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, Indonesia, we found that the super affluent felt fairly ignored. And they felt that, because they have the wealth and the wherewithal, they'll manage it on their own. And it was very interesting to talk to a few of them to see that, we feel a bit neglected. We wouldn't mind some ideas and some thoughts around how we could experience travel in a different way. And that's why, as you're aware, the Mastercard has something called the Priceless platform. We're actually working very hard towards curating very specific priceless Islamic experiences, which again is something which is going to be first of its kind. But again, we feel while they are a bit on the expensive side when it comes to affordability, but there is a big segment there, especially for the key corridors, right? And we can market destinations in the Middle East and vice versa, where there is a massive travel corridor. Right, and as travel picks up now, you will see a lot more of those people coming in. They have the purchasing parity, Soumaya, as you just said, right, and they need unique experiences of their ilk. And that's where we, like Chee Chong said, we are talking to influencers who are catering to the affluent audience as well, and say, hey, you know what, can we have a hijab makeover experience, which is very unique, very different, using the best silk. So there are, there's this untapped market at both ends, to add to what Chee Chong said. And it's very interesting. And it's, again, like I said, we're getting, we're just dipping our toes in it. And it looks very, very exciting indeed.
Yeah, I mean, you've hit some really interesting points, and I'm sure our viewers actually may be making some notes now about potential new business ideas. Targeting the mega rich, because as you said, I mean, we already know that this market is worth hundreds of billions, and we already know that it's severely underserved. So it stands to reason that with the right kind of services designed with specific segments, designed with specific people in mind, you have a chance to go a long way. And touching on the point of social media and influencers, how might destinations utilize social media in a better way to connect more closely with their chosen segments in the halal tourism space? Because I think while there is definitely a growth in the proliferation of halal travel websites, halal travel information, which will increase the number of free independent travelers that we're seeing, there are still a relatively small number of Muslim travel influencers. We've got Muslim lifestyle influencers, fashion is a big one, modest fashion. We've got food, and of course, food is a key part of traveling anyway. But the kind of Muslim travel influencer space is still quite young. It's still growing. How might destinations come up with creative ways to access Muslims through platforms such as TikTok, for example, which we already know has some of the fastest growth rates and is one of the best converting platforms as well in terms of getting people to take action and make purchases and choose to make a decision based on something that they have seen?
Okay, I think it's true that in all scheme of things, the number of Muslim influencers and KOL is still small, right? I think it has a little bit about culture as well. It's no different from the China or the Chinese market. I would say the China market. The Chinese market earliest is that it's not good to be on YouTube videos. It's not good to expose yourself to the whole world in that sense, right? But we have passed that. I mean, the China market have passed that stage. Right? I think it is also at some point the Muslim culture itself will also pass that age, because we had seen a lot of younger ones coming up. So, I think one thing to start with, if you can't find that many right influencers, I think the minimum the destination themselves should do is to post their videos on TikTok. I think that is the minimum that the destination themselves should do. You should start to explore other channels to actually get your destination out. I mean, even without the influencers, you should still get these channels out. Or when you do a videos, you have to find some young kids. I'm sorry to say that, but you have to find some young kids to dance, to do something, and to really to get that vibrancy out and push it out. I think that is really key in terms of marketing as a destination, to say, look, we are young, we are vibrant, and we are Muslim friendly, right? And you could thoroughly enjoy the destination, and there are facilities to help you to enjoy the place. Yeah, so that's my view.
So I think just to add on to what Chee Chong said, I set up my own TikTok account just last week actually. It's an amazing new world that I'm in. Still trying to digest what I'm seeing, but I totally agree. I think certainly destinations should explore these platforms. Look, because these platforms are driven also by facts, right? TikTok is the fastest growing social media platform. So sooner or later, your travelers are going to be from TikTok land. So you have to know the language that they're speaking, how they're communicating, and so forth. Because sooner or later, that's the kind of frequency that you got to communicate with them. And on the other side as well, just to touch on what the panel said, right, on the importance of knowing who your segment is. I think that's really key. I think one reason why this whole Muslim travel marketing or even Muslim audiences in general, this segmenting is still an issue is because for the longest time we've been using that convenient number, right? The global Muslim population is as such, therefore this is the potential, but we all know that's not a segment. We all know that, right? That alone cannot define how you behave, how you think, and so forth. So one of the suggestions that I made in my book was perhaps we could also use tools such as artificial intelligence by using data to also now start to cluster segments and try to figure out properly what are these segments like. Because so far we've been going along certain stereotypes, right? Big families, then suddenly we have the argument of small families, or this and that and that. Let's try now to use the data as well to help inform us of what the segments really are, and at the same time explore these tools that are out there. Yeah.
No, I think you're bang on, Dr. Hafiz, because another thing which, we conducted a survey called the Mastercard Experience Survey. And one of the things that came out, and especially thanks to what's happened, because of the pandemic, wellness has become a big, big passion point. And that is something which people are seeking across segments, all right? Taking care of self, family, mental wellness. These things were for a few, till about 2 years ago, and now it's for all of us, right? So that's another area to look at when people are planning to get people over to a destination, tourists over to a destination. Can we offer them that as well? It's not just about the fun part of it or the value part of it. Can we actually do something for wellness and health? That's another. It used to be a trend, if you remember, 3-4 years ago, there used to be yoga retreats and so on and so forth. But that was more a trend. But this is reality. I think health and wellness is very, very greatly ingrained. Up to 83% of respondents had said that we would want people to talk to us about health and wellness, not just about offers and discounts. You can give me a discount on a wellness benefit, but I want to talk about the wellness benefit. So I think that becomes a very very interesting conversation to have, with the segments we want to target as well.
I just want to add on.
Chong.
A quick one thing as well. I think that while we can use the channels like TikTok and all this thing, I think the messaging should still be very consistent. I think if you look at Muslim travelers, I do note that actually family inclusiveness is very, very, very key, right? And I think you cannot leave without advertising on that, the familyness of experiencing the destination. I think that is still very key in terms of marketing. Yeah, in my personal view. Yeah.
You mean in terms of friendliness towards Muslims, or do you mean in terms of friendliness towards family type?
Yes, that means if you do a TikTok show, I think it's important that it's how the family can enjoy a certain destination, things like that. Because we do still see that most of the travelers is still in family groups, actually.
Well, I think this is actually going to be a growing trend as well, because if we're looking at the demographics of just the global Muslim population without honing in too much, we are obviously the youngest, the fastest growing religion. And we've got a large segment of Muslims now who are hitting their 30s, right? So they're starting families, they're getting married. And this is a really, it's got a huge growth potential. I think we're going to see start to come into itself over the next few years, where we've got more of this type of demand. So actually that's, I think, really forward thinking. And again, another opportunity for someone watching to take up, hopefully. A lot of really interesting points, and I'm glad that we've been able to hone in on the segmentation, the sustainability, and how we can give travelers more for their experiences in terms of wellness, in terms of getting them closer to the destination, in terms of feeling like they've had a holistically beneficial experience. In terms of kind of OIC and non-OIC countries, shall we say, this is generally for everyone. Is there a country, or not necessarily a country, maybe a region or a specific destination that stands out in your mind currently as leading the way in this kind of post-pandemic new normal type messaging, specifically in relation to Muslim travelers, in relation to welcoming Muslim travelers, in relation to teasing out messages that will really clearly target Muslim travelers?
Yeah, if I may go first, I think there's a lot of good work happening. ASEAN, obviously, definitely. If you look at Malaysia and Indonesia, they do a fantastic job of not just outbound but inbound as well. But one of the interesting places where I see marketing being used in a very, very smart sense is UAE. So they were added before the pandemic, and they've been added right after the pandemic as well. And it's the way they use technology, the intersection of that, the intersection of them knowing who's coming, who they want to attract that segment, and they will call so they will call you to the expo, but they know that the parent is coming for something else, the child is going to be there for something else, and it's like it's so well thought through, right? And the way they've reimagined Visit Dubai, to me has been really, really remarkable. I think it's a great case study in effective destination marketing, especially for the Muslim traveler as well.
I agree. If you look at the OIC, I think Dubai is really a standout, and I think they hit the right balance to it feels the way they market themselves to different segment, and yet it feels so inclusive, right? Is that whether you are Muslim travelers or you're not a Muslim traveler, this place is where everybody can come and enjoy. And I think that inclusiveness feel of Dubai makes it really interesting that it's like it's the place that everybody wants to be. If you talk about the non-OIC, then I'll have to say that probably Singapore also did quite well in terms of capturing this market as well. Of course, we have the natural advantage that at least 20% of our population or 30% of population are Muslim itself, right? So, but again, there is a definite conscious effort in tourism board, Singapore Tourism Board, to chase after this market as well, and to project that we do welcome this market as well. So I think Dubai, Singapore itself, to me, is the two leading tourism board in terms of marketing.
I agree with Chong and Mayank. I think the UAE region was really one of the first that I saw, at least because I'm from the education side as well, right? I remember vividly seeing these advertisements of, hey, come to our school's community center to get your vaccinations. And these were from the schools in UAE itself. And they were very early on advertising that in 2020, thereabout, when we were still waiting for our vaccination SMSs, to be honest. So I remember that very clearly. The students themselves were somewhat ambassadors for the country, right? That, hey, we are safe, and look, we are already starting our inoculations. And for the non-IC, I think Singapore is a standout, again, because of its Reimagine campaign.
Okay, and I'm surprised that we managed to reach unanimous agreement on that final question. I think I would have to add in maybe a slightly different view very briefly, which is South Korea, which we haven't touched upon so much. I think during the pandemic, certainly kind of in the Western regions where Muslims are located specifically, we've seen a rise in two things. Interest in K-dramas, obviously, because everyone was at home watching Netflix. And B, the marketing campaigns around visiting South Korea, around experiencing authentic Korean experiences. And I specifically remember last year, they got a Korean chef who spoke in Korean, teaching Korean recipes, but that have been modified to make them friendly to Muslims so that they can cook them. And I think it's like you mentioned, Chong, this type of inclusivity, this type of you're welcome. We want you to come and come as you are. We want you to come as you are. You're welcome. Eat with us, connect with our culture, connect with our heritage. And I think overall that's a really beautiful message to be sharing in tourism. And it's a really beautiful way to reimagine and remake customer experiences in tourism, which is about bringing people together, particularly after such a long period of being apart, enjoying good food together and having these beautiful experiences that hopefully elevate your life in some way. So with that, I want to thank each of you very much. Unfortunately, we have to come to the end of our session. It's been an absolute pleasure. I, for one, have definitely learned a lot of gems. Really, thank you very much, Mayank from Mastercard, Dr. Nurhafihz, and Chong from GlobalTix. It's been a pleasure. And I hope you will check out some more of the Halal Travel sessions later today.